Hello, all you beautiful people out there, and welcome to my channel for Saturday live stream. And I do have a comment of the week for you. And this week's comment of the week goes to Command Cyborg. Congratulations, Command Cyborg. They say not even a Cambrian bunny would disprove evolution. I think you may mean a Precambrian bunny, but I'm not sure. Anyway, let me know, Command Cyborg. Um, Moving on with this comment, it would have to rethink a bit of the cladistics, though. But there's way too much other proof for most of it to wreck it utterly for such a petty test. Mm, mm, Not quite sure if that's what you meant to put. Good show. So, congratulations, Command Cyborg. And now it is time to go on to the main attraction of the show, which is making fun of the Bible. One of my favorite things to do. Just because it's so funny. It's so it's so fun to make it's so easy to make fun of the Bible, you know what I mean? It's like you don't even have to think. You just have to do it. All right. So I'm going to stop my camera and get on with the main event. Okay, so we are in 1 Kings chapter 5. When Hiram, king of Tyre, heard that Solomon had been anointed king to succeed his father David, he sent his envoys to Solomon because he had always been on friendly terms with David. Solomon sent back this message to Hiram. You know that because of the wars waged against my father David from all sides, he could not build a temple for the name of the Lord his God until the Lord put his enemies under his feet. Uh, Solomon, that is not why David could not build the temple. Uh, Again, God has Alzheimer's since this is supposed to be his book. According to his own fucking book, he said David was not allowed to build the temple because David was a man of war. That was the specific reason God gave David for not being able to build the temple. I don't know where this comes from. Alrighty. Verse 4. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side, and there is no adversary or disaster. I intend therefore to build a temple for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord told my father David when he said, your son whom I will put on the throne in your place will build the temple for my name. Um, okay, God, whatever happened to the God of Israel doesn't dwell in houses made by men? Do you remember that? Remember when you said that? Hey, Nevermore, the God of Israel doesn't dwell in houses made by men. Do you remember that? Maybe not. I mean, you do have Alzheimer's. All right, moving on. Verse 6. So give orders that cedars of Lebanon be cut for me. My men will work with yours, and I will pay you for your men whatever wages you set. You know that we have no one so skilled in felling timber as the Sidonians. When Hiram heard Solomon's message, he was greatly pleased and said, Praise be to the Lord today, for he has given David a wise son to rule over this great nation. So Hiram sent word to Solomon, I have received the message you sent me, and will do all you want in providing the cedar and juniper logs. My men will haul them down from Lebanon to the Mediterranean Sea, and I will float them as rafts by sea to the place you specify. There I will separate them, and you can take them away. And you are to grant my wish by providing food for my royal household. In this way, Hiram kept Solomon supplied with all the cedar and juniper logs he wanted. And Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 quarters of wheat as food for his household, in addition to 20,000 baths of pressed olive oil. Solomon continued to do this for Hiram year after year. The Lord gave Solomon wisdom, just as he had promised him. There were peaceful relations between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty. King Solomon conscripted laborers from all Israel, 30,000 men. Yeah, Solomon, you're really wise making your people do slave labor. I mean, that's not exactly what conscription is. They do get the necessities, but we're basically talking slavery here. Verse 14 He sent them off to Lebanon in shifts of 10,000 a month, so that they spent 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon had 70,000 carriers and 8,000 stone cutters in the hills, as well as 3,300 foremen who supervised the project and directed the workers. At the king's command, they removed from the quarry large blocks of high grade stone to provide a foundation of dressed stone for the temple. The craftsmen of Solomon and Hiram and workers from Byblos cut and prepared the timber and stone for the building of the temple. In the 480th year after the Israelites came out of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, the 2nd month, he began to build the temple of the Lord. The temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 high. The portico at the front of the main hall of the temple extended the width of the temple, that is, 20 cubits, and projected 10 cubits from the front of the temple. I just got a question. Why do we need all these boring ass um, things about the temple, like it's yay high and yay long, and why? Uh, why? You know what? I mean, this sounds like just a goddamn made up story to me. Because why do they have to tell the measurements of the temple if the temple's right there in Jerusalem for people to see, you know? And plus, people are supposed to come to the temple to, make their sacrifices to God, you know? So I mean they gotta come at least once a year, right? So why are they giving the this shit in the Bible. It sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, okay? But it sounds like a goddamn made up story to me because nobody has been able to find anything about Solomon's temple except here in the Bible. They found Herod's temple, which is supposedly built on the ruins of Solomon's temple, right? But they haven't found any ruins of Solomon's temple. Just a thought. All right, moving on. Verse 5. Against the walls of the main hall and the inner sanctuary, he built a structure around the building in which there were side rooms. The lowest floor was 5 cubits wide, the middle floor 6 cubits, and the third floor 7. He made offset ledges around the outside of the temple so that nothing would be inserted into the temple walls. In building the temple, only blocks dressed at the quarry were used, and no hammer, chisel, or any other iron tool was heard at the temple site while it was being built. The entrance to the lowest floor was on the south side of the temple. A stairway led up to the middle level and from there to the third. So he built the temple and completed it, roofing it with beams and cedar planks. And he built the side rooms all along the temple. The height of each was 5 cubits, and they were attached to the temple by beams of cedar. The word of the Lord came to Solomon. As for this temple you are building, if you follow my decrees, observe my laws, and keep all my commands and obey them, I will fulfill through you the promise I gave to David your father, and I will live among the Israelites and will not abandon my people Israel. Yeah, God, he broke that promise long, long time ago. I mean, come on. I'm acting as if this God is real and he's not. I do that because that's the only way this makes any fucking sense. But I mean, come on. Come on, people. Do better. Alrighty. Verse 14. So Solomon built the temple and completed it. He lined its interior walls with cedar boards, paneling them from the floor of the temple to the ceiling, and covering the floor of the temple with planks of juniper. He partitioned off 20 cubits at the rear of the temple with cedar boards from floor to ceiling to form within the temple an inner sanctuary, the most holy place. The main hall in front of this room was 40 cubits long. The inside of the temple was cedar, carved with gourds and open flowers. Everything was cedar. No stone was to be seen. He prepared the inner sanctuary within the temple to set the ark of the covenant of the Lord there. The inner sanctuary was 20 cubits long, 20 wide, and 20 high. He overlaid the inside with pure gold, and he also overlaid the altar of cedar. Solomon covered the inside of the temple with pure gold, and he extended gold chains across the front of the inner sanctuary, which was overlaid with gold. Um, okay, why? Why are you overlaying gold with gold? Anyway, moving on. So he overlaid the whole interior with gold. He also overlaid with gold the altar that belonged to the inner sanctuary. Verse 23. For the inner sanctuary he made a pair of cherubim out of olive wood. each 10 cubits high. One wing of the first cherub was 5 cubits long, and the other wing 5 cubits, 10 cubits from wingtip to wingtip. The second cherub also measured 10 cubits, for the 2 cherubim were identical in size and shape. Well, yeah, otherwise you'd look like a fucking moron. The height of each cherub was 10 cubits. He placed the cherubim inside the innermost room of the temple with their wings spread out. The wing of one cherub touched one wall, while the wing of the other touched the other wall, and their wings touched each other in the middle of the room. He overlaid the cherubim with gold. Oh, great. So not only do you have this ark, which for all we know never existed, has this has 2 cherubim over it, right? So now we've got the Holy of Holies with 2 cherubim. Ugh. All right, moving on. Verse 29. On the walls all around the temple, in both the inner and outer rooms, he carved cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. He also covered the floors of both the inner and outer temple with gold. Where are you getting this much gold? Verse 31. For the entrance of the inner temple, he made doors out of olive wood that were 1/5 of the width of the sanctuary, and on the 2 olive wood doors he carved cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and overlaid the cherubim and palm trees with hammered gold. In the same way, for the entrance to the main hall, he made door frames out of olive wood that were 1/4 of the width of the hall. He also made 2 doors out of juniper wood, each having 2 leaves that turned in sockets. That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, he carved cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers on them and overlaid them with gold, hammered evenly over the carvings. And he built the inner courtyard of 3 courses of dressed stone and 1 course of trimmed cedar beams. The foundation of the temple of the Lord was laid in the 4th year in the month of Ziv. In the 11th year, in the month of Bul, the 8th month, the temple was finished in all its details according to its specifications. He had spent 7 years building it. Okay, so not done. Hey, limited light. I'm not done, but I do have to mute myself for a minute, maybe more, but no more than that. Okay, moving on. Chapter 7. It took Solomon 13 years, however, to complete the construction of his palace. Now that ought to tell you something. That ought to tell you something right there. How important could God have been to Solomon if it took almost twice as long for Solomon to build his palace than to build the quote unquote house of the Lord? Honestly, Think about it. He's willing to spend more time on his own fucking palace than he is to build a house for his god. Does that make any sense to anybody? Okay, moving on. Verse 2. He built the palace of the forest of Lebanon, 100 cubits long. Okay, does Lebanon have any forests anymore? Or did this dude take it all up? Just asking. Um, Going back, he built the palace of the forest of Lebanon, 100 cubits long, 50 wide, and 30 high, with 4 rows of cubic columns, of cedar columns, rather, supporting trimmed cedar beams. It was roofed with cedar above the beams that rested on the columns, 45 beams, 15 to a row. Its windows were placed high in sets of 3 facing each other. All the doorways had rectangular frames. They were in sets of 3 facing each other. He made a colonnade 50 cubits long and 30 wide. In front of it was a portico, and in front of that were pillars and an overhanging roof. He built the throne hall, the hall of justice, where he was to judge, and he covered it with cedar from floor to ceiling. And the palace in which he was to live, set further back, was similar in design. Solomon also made a palace like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had married. All these structures, from the outside to the great courtyard and from foundation to eaves, were made of blocks of high grade stone cut to size and smoothed on their inner and outer faces. The foundations were laid with large stones of good quality, some measuring 10 cubits and some 8. Above were high grade stones cut to size and cedar beams. The great courtyard was surrounded by a wall of 3 courses of dressed stone and 1 course of trimmed cedar beams, as was the inner courtyard of the temple of the Lord with its portico. Verse 13. King Solomon sent to Tyre and brought Huram, whose mother was a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and whose father was from Tyre, and a skilled craftsman in bronze. Huram was filled with wisdom, with understanding, and with knowledge to do all kinds of bronze work. He came to King Solomon and did all the work assigned to him. He cast 2 bronze pillars, each 18 cubits high and 12 cubits in circumference. He also made 2 capitals of cast bronze to set on the tops of the pillars. I'm not sure what capitals are, and it doesn't have a footnote that I can uh, um, jump to. Each capital was 5 cubits high. A network of interwoven chains adorned the capitals on top of the pillars, 7 for each capital. He made pomegranates in 2 rows, encircling each network to decorate the capitals on top of the pillars. He did the same for each capital. The capitals on top of the pillars in the portico were in the shape of lilies 4 cubits high. On the capital of both pillars above the bowl shaped part next to the network were the 200 pomegranates in rows all around. He erected the pillars at the portico of the temple. The pillar to the south he named Jachin, and the one to the north Boaz. The capitals on top were in the shape of lilies, and so the work on the pillars was completed. He made the sea of cast metal, circular in shape, measuring 10 cubits from rim to rim, and 5 cubits high. It took a line of 30 cubits to measure around it. Below the rim, gourds encircled it, 10 to a cubit. The gourds were cast in 2 rows in one piece with the sea. Okay, I just got to say something. I have just entered an alternate reality with reading this shit. I have no fucking clue, no fucking clue what this is talking about, aside from a dude's building a palace. You could have just said that, okay? We don't need all the fucking details. Right, Tim. But seriously, what is this? All right, moving on. Verse 25. The sea stood on 12 bulls, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea rested on top of them, and their hindquarters were toward the center. It was a handbreadth in thickness, and its rim was like the rim of a cup, like a lily blossom. It held 2,000 baths. Okay, so this is interesting. So originally in Canaanite mythology, the bull belonged to El. And somewhere along the way, Yahweh appropriated it. Because remember, as I said, somehow El and Yahweh and Baal got all crushed together, right? Okay. But if you remember correctly, Yahweh got really pissed off in Exodus when the Israelites made a bull calf in the wilderness. So, why does God not have a problem with Solomon making bulls for, I guess it's a fountain? And, but he did have a problem with the Israelites making a bull in the wilderness. Does this make any kind of sense? I'm not sure, Big Zebra. All right, moving on. Verse 27. He also made 10 movable stands of bronze. Each was 4 cubits long, 4 wide, and 3 high. This is how the stands were made. Why do we need to know how the stands were made? Oh my fucking God. You know what? If if everything in this fucking book was cut out that we didn't need to know, it'd be half as long. Just saying. All right, moving on. They had side panels attached to uprights. On the panels between the uprights were lions, bulls, and cherubim, and on the uprights as well. Above and below the lions and bulls were wreaths of hammered work. Each stand had four bronze wheels with bronze axles, and each had a basin resting on four supports cast with wreaths on each side. On the inside of the stand, there was an opening that had a circular frame 1 cubit deep. This opening was round, and with its basework, it measured a cubit and a half. Around its opening, there was engraving. The panels of the stands were square, not round. The four wheels were under the panels, and the axles of the wheels were attached to the stand. The diameter of each wheel was a cubit and a half. The wheels were made like chariot wheels. The axles, rims, spokes, and hubs were all of cast metal. Each stand had four handles, one on each corner projecting from the stand. At the top of the stand, there was a circular band half a cubit deep. The supports and panels were attached to the top of the stand. He engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees on the surface of the supports and on the panels and every available space with wreaths all around. This is the way he made the 10 stands. They were all cast in the same molds and were identical in shape and size. He then made 10 bronze basins, each holding 40 baths and measuring 4 cubits across, one basin to go on each of the 10 stands. He placed 5 of the stands on the south side of the temple and 5 on the north. He placed the sea on the south side at the southeast corner of the temple. He also made the pots and shovels and sprinkling bowls. So Hiram finished all the work he had undertaken for King Solomon in the temple of the Lord. 2 pillars, 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, 2 sets of network decorating the 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, 400 pomegranates for the 2 sets of network, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network decorating the bowl-shaped capitals on each pillar, 10 stands with their 10 basins, the sea and the 12 bowls under it, the pots, shovels, and sprinkling bowls. All these objects that Hiram made for King Solomon for the temple of the Lord were of burnished bronze. Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, whoa. How did we get back to the temple of the Lord? They were talking about his palace. So, okay. So they started talking about his palace. And now they're going back to the temple of the Lord. Why? Why? Do they mean Solomon's palace? Do 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 do. Solomon also made all the furnishings that were in the Lord's temple: the golden altar, the gold table on which was the bread of the presence, the lampstands of pure gold, 5 on the right and 5 on the left in front of the inner sanctuary, gold floral work and lamps and tongs, pure gold basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, dishes, and censers, gold sockets for the doors of the innermost room, the most holy place, and also for the doors of the main hall of the temple. When all the work King Solomon had done for the temple of the Lord was finished, he brought in the things his father David had dedicated, the silver and gold and the furnishings, and he placed them in the treasuries of the Lord's temple. I know, right? They start off talking about King Solomon's palace, and now they go back to the goddamn fucking temple. Unless they mean King Solomon's palace. But I don't think that's what they mean because they're talking about bringing in all the shit that David gathered for God. Yeah, I know, Tara, I'm right. Not only that, but what does an all powerful God need with gold? He's all powerful, right? Why does he need gold? And another thing, why does he need anybody to do anything for him? He's all powerful, right? He could just snap his fingers and boom, have the temple where he wants it, how he wants it. Nobody's got to do anything. What sense does this make? Of course, it makes no sense at all because we're not talking about God, are we? We're talking about people. Yeah, tell me about it, Taryn. All right, chapter 8. Then King Solomon summoned into his presence at Jerusalem the elders of Israel, all the heads of the tribes and the chiefs of the Israelite families, to bring up the ark of the Lord's covenant from Zion, the city of David. All the Israelites came together to King Solomon at the time of the festival in the month of Ethanim, the 7th month. When all the elders of Israel had arrived, the priests took up the ark, and they brought up the ark of the Lord and the tent of meeting and all the sacred furnishings in it. The priests and Levites carried them up, and King Solomon and the entire assembly of Israel that had gathered about him were before the ark, sacrificing so many sheep and cattle that they could not be recorded or counted. Yeah, and I've got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you. Verse 6. The priests then brought the ark of the Lord's covenant to its place in the inner sanctuary of the temple, the most holy place, and put it beneath the wings of the cherubim. The cherubim spread their wings over the place of the ark and overshadowed the ark and its carrying poles. These poles were so long that their ends could be seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary, but not from outside the holy place, and they are still there today. I'm not even gonna bother. I was gonna say something snarky, but I'm not even gonna bother with the snark. There was nothing in the ark except the 2 stone tablets that Moses had placed in it at Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites after they came out of Egypt. When the priests withdrew from the holy place, the cloud filled the temple of the Lord, and the priests could not perform their service because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled his temple. Then Solomon said, "The Lord has said that he would dwell in a dark cloud. I have indeed built a magnificent temple for you, a place for you to dwell forever. Solomon, what's that saying? Pride goes before a fall. And it wasn't forever, was it? Just saying. Okay, I had to get that snark out of the way. Verse 14. While the whole assembly of Israel was standing there, the king turned around and blessed them. Then he said, Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who with his own hand has fulfilled what he promised with his own mouth to my father David. For he said, Since the day I brought my people Israel out of Egypt, I have not chosen a city in any tribe of Israel to have a temple built so that my name might be there, but I have chosen David to rule over my people Israel. My father David had it in his heart to build a temple for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. But the Lord said to my father David, You did well to have it in your heart to build a temple for my name. Nevertheless, you are not the one to build the temple, but your son, your own flesh and blood. He is the one who will build the temple for my name. The Lord has kept the promise he made. I have succeeded David my father, and now I sit on the throne of Israel, just as the Lord promised, and I have built the temple for the name of the Lord God of Israel. I have provided a place there for the ark, in which is the covenant of the Lord that he made with our ancestors when he brought them out of Egypt. Then Solomon stood before the altar of the Lord in front of the whole assembly of Israel, spread out his hand toward heaven, and said, Lord, the God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth below. You who keep your covenant of love with your servants, who continue wholeheartedly in your way, you have kept your promise to your servant David, my father. With your mouth you have promised, and with your hand you have fulfilled it, as it is today. No. With his hand, he did not fulfill it. If we give this God any kind of credence whatsoever, which we shouldn't because he doesn't exist, he used men. Moving on. Verse 25. Now, Lord, the God of Israel, keep for your servant David, my father, the promises you made to him when you said, You shall never fail to have a successor to sit before me on the throne of Israel, if only your descendants are careful in all they do to walk before me faithfully as you have done. Yeah, well, he kind of broke that promise, didn't he? There hasn't been a descendant of David on the throne of Israel for how long? Of course, there's a qualifier in there, but you got to have that qualifier in there. Otherwise, it's just too blatant to see that God broke his promise, right? But will God really dwell on earth? The heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you. How much less this temple I have built? Yet wait a minute. If you knew the temple couldn't contain God, why'd you build it? Seriously? Yet give attention to your servant's prayer and his plea for mercy. Sorry, guys. The um, online Bible website's been having trouble today. Hang on, guys. I gotta I gotta get something. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. I had to help my dad. Alrighty. Hang on. Okay. Okay, so verse 27, I think this is where I left off. If not, who cares? I don't give a fuck, really. I just like making fun of the Bible. Verse 27, but will God really dwell on earth? The heavens, even the highest heavens, can't contain you. How much less this temple I have built? So why'd you build it? Yet give attention to your servant's prayer and his plea for mercy, Lord my God. Hear the cry and prayer of your servant in your presence this day. May your eyes be open toward this temple night and day, this place of which you said, my name shall be there, so that you will hear the prayer your servant's your servant prays toward this place. Hear the supplication of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray toward this place. Hear from heaven your dwelling place, and when you hear, forgive. When anyone wrongs their neighbor and is required to take an oath, and they come and swear an oath before the altar in this temple, then hear from heaven and act. Judge between your servants, condemning the guilty by bringing down on their heads what they have done, and vindicating the innocent by treating them in accordance with their innocence. I just got to say, if this God was real, I don't trust him to judge shit. Moving on. Verse 33, when your people Israel have been defeated by an enemy because they have sinned against you, and when they turn back to you and give praise to your name, praying and making supplication to you in this temple, then hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your people Israel and bring them back to the land you gave to their ancestors. When the heavens are shut up and there is no rain because your people have sinned against you, and when they pray towards this place and give praise to your name, and turn from their sin because you have afflicted them, then hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your servants, your people Israel. Teach them the right way to live and send rain on the land and on the land you gave your people for an inheritance. When famine or plague comes to the land, or blight or mildew, locusts or grasshoppers, or when an enemy besieges them in any of their cities, whatever disaster or disease may come, and when a prayer or plea is made by anyone among the people Israel, being aware of the afflictions of their own hearts and spreading out their hands toward this temple, then hear from heaven your dwelling place. Forgive and act. Deal with everyone according to all they do, since you know their hearts, for you alone know every human heart, so that they will fear you all the time they live in the land that you gave our ancestors. As for the foreigner who does not belong to your people Israel, but has come from a distant land because of your name, for they will hear of your great name and your mighty hand and your outstretched arm when they come and pray toward this temple, then hear from heaven your dwelling place. Do whatever the foreigner asks of you, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your own people Israel, and may know that this house I have built bears your name. When your people go to war against their enemies, wherever you send them, and when they pray to the Lord toward the city you have chosen and the temple I built for your name, then hear from heaven their prayer and their plea, and uphold their cause. When they sin against you, for there is no one who does not sin, and you become angry with them and give them over to their enemies, who take them captive to their own lands, far away or near, and if they have a change of heart in the land where they are held captive, and repent and plead with you in the land of their captors, and say, we have sinned, we have done wrong, we have acted wickedly, and if they turn back to you with all their heart and soul in the land of their enemies, who take them captive, and pray to you toward the land that you gave their ancestors, toward the city you have chosen, and the temple I have built for your name, Then from heaven, your dwelling place, hear their prayer and their plea and uphold their cause. And forgive your people who have sinned against you. Forgive all the offenses they have committed against you, and cause their captors to show mercy, for they are your people and your inheritance, whom you brought out of Egypt, out of that iron smelting furnace. May your eyes be open to your servant's plea and to the plea of your people Israel, and may you listen to them whenever they cry to you, for you singled them out from all the nations of the world to be your own inheritance, just as you declared through your servant Moses when you, sovereign Lord, brought our ancestors out of Egypt. When Solomon had finished all these prayers and supplications to the Lord, he rose from before the altar of the Lord, where he had been kneeling with his hands spread out toward heaven. He stood and blessed the whole assembly of Israel in a loud voice. Praise to the Lord, who has given rest to his people Israel, just as he has promised. Not one word has failed of all the good promises he's made through his servant Moses. May the Lord our God be with us as he was with our ancestors. May he never leave us nor forsake us. Yeah, that turned out great, didn't it? And may these words of mine, which I have prayed before the Lord, be near the Lord God day and night, that he may uphold the cause of his servant and the cause of his people Israel, according to each day's need, so that all the people of the earth may know that the Lord is God and there is no other. And may your hearts be fully committed to the Lord our God, to live by his decrees and obey his commands at this time. Then the king and all Israel with him offered sacrifices before the Lord. Solomon offered a sacrifice of fellowship offerings to the Lord, 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep and goats. So the king and all the Israelites dedicated the temple to the Lord. And on that same day, the king consecrated the middle part of the courtyard in front of the temple of the Lord, and there he offered burnt offerings, grain offerings, and the fat of the fellowship offerings, because the bronze altar that stood before the Lord was too small to hold the burnt offerings, the grain offerings, and the fat of the fellowship offerings. So Solomon observed the festival that time, and all Israel with him, a vast assembly, people from Lebo Hamath to the Wadi of Egypt. They celebrated it before the Lord our God for 7 days and 7 days more, 14 days in all. On all the following days, he sent the people away. They blessed the king and went home, joyful and glad in heart for all the good things the Lord had done for his servant David and his people Israel. Chapter 9, and thankfully the last chapter for today. When Solomon had finished building the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, and had achieved all he had desired to do, the Lord appeared to him a second time as he appeared at Gibeon. The Lord said to him, I have heard the prayer and plea you've made before me, and I have consecrated this temple, which you have built by putting my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there. Okay, so where is the Lord's eyes and heart now? Huh. Kind of a good question, actually. As for you, if you walk before me faithfully with integrity of heart and uprightness, as David your father did, and do all I command and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father, when I said, You shall never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. And that's just one promise of many that God has broken. But if you or your descendants turn away from me, and here it is, the qualifier that needs to be there, because otherwise, well, but if you or your descendants turn away from me and do not observe the commands and decrees I've given you, and go off to serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land I've given them, and will reject this temple I have consecrated for my name. Israel will then become a byword and an object of ridicule among all peoples. This temple will become a heap of rubble. All who pass by will be appalled and will scoff and say, Why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple. People will answer because they have forsaken the Lord their God, who brought their ancestors out of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. That is why the Lord brought all this disaster on them. At the end of 20 years, during which Solomon built these two buildings, the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, King Solomon gave 20 towns in Galilee to Hiram, king of Tyre, because Hiram had supplied him with all the cedar and juniper and gold he wanted. Ah, yeah, don't take my gold. Don't take my gold, God. Take somebody else's gold. Mm-hmm. Now we get the story. Verse 12. But when Hiram went from Tyre to see the towns Solomon had given him, he was not pleased with them. Gee, imagine that. What kind of towns are these that you've given me, my brother? And he called them the land of Kabul, a name they have to this day. Now Hiram had sent the king 120 talents of gold. Here is the account of the forced labor King Solomon conscripted to build the Lord's temple, his own palace, the terraces, the wall of Jerusalem, and Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. What kind of a wise king makes slaves of his own people? I mean, makes slaves of any people. Let's get real here. Nobody should be a slave to anybody else. Verse 16. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had attacked and captured Gezer. He had set it on fire. He killed its Canaanite inhabitants and then gave it as a wedding gift to his daughter Solomon's wife. And Solomon rebuilt Gezer. He built up Lower Beth Horon, Baalath, and Tadmor in the desert within his land, as well as all his store cities and the towns for his chariots and for his horses, whatever he desired to build in Jerusalem and Lebanon and throughout all the territory he ruled. There were still people left from the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. These people were not all Israelites. Solomon conscripted the descendants of all these people remaining in the land, whom the Israels could not exterminate, to serve as slave labor, as it is to this day. But Solomon did not make slaves of any of the Israelites. Sure you didn't, Solomon. Sure you didn't. They were his fighting men, his government officials, his officers, his captains, and the commanders of his chariots and charioteers. They were also the chief officials in charge of Solomon's projects, 550 officials supervising those who did the work. After Pharaoh's daughter had come up from the city of David to the palace Solomon had built for her, he constructed the terraces. 3 times a year, Solomon sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings on the altar he had built for the Lord, burning incense before the Lord along with them, and so fulfilled the temple obligations. King Solomon also built ships at Ezion Geber, which is near Elath and Edom on the shores of the Red Sea, and Hiram sent his men, sailors who knew the sea, to serve in the fleet of Solomon's men. They sailed to Ophir and brought back 420 talents of gold, which they delivered to King Solomon. So, thank goodness that's over with. Why do I do this to myself? Oh, yeah, because if I don't read everything, I'll be um, accused by the Christians of not reading things in context. Like that hasn't happened before, even though I'm literally reading every word on the fucking page, right? And then making fun of the Bible. And hopefully a few Christians will have their eyes open how absolutely, positively stupid not only this book, but their religion is. So, oh my goodness. So, I'm sorry I had to leave for a few minutes. I had to help my dad. And, you know, I I don't know. Pastors tell their sheeple to read the Bible, and that's actually something I agree with the pastors on. If there are any Christians watching right now or after this is posted, please, please read your Bible. Read your fucking Bible. That is the best advice any pastor has given their sheeple. Anyway, like the video or dislike the video, I don't care. Uh, Leave a comment down below. If you like what I do and you can afford it, please become a member of this channel. You can become a member of this channel for 99 cents a month. And I forgot to put the banner up, but I'll put the banner up now. And when I remember, which is usually most times, to put the banner up, you will appear on this banner and you will have my undying thanks. And you will also appear on my thank you page at the end of my edited videos. Speaking of edited videos, I will have another John Pendleton debunk ready for my members tomorrow. It will be available to everyone on Tuesday. And hey, Krishna, glad you could join us. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Krishna. But Christians, all that other quote unquote scripture is just of the devil, and we would never read it because we don't want Satan being put in us. So, people might ask why I do what I do. It's very simple. It's very, very simple. Christianity ruined my life. Now, luckily, I've got about half my life left. Maybe a little more, who knows? Um, and I want to save somebody the trouble of having half their life eaten up by this bullshit. And if I can save anybody from that, I'm happy. That's why I do this. Namaste, Krishna. Namaste. By the way, Krishna is a Hindu, and I've got no problem with Krishna or Hinduism. So, you know, anyway, have a great day, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow for Atheist Church. And don't forget to comment. It's important to comment. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.